Okay, we're continuing with colonial government. We'll call this Life in Colonial America Part 8, continuing with Imperial Administration and possibly getting as far as colonial money systems, and that topic will conclude the first unit of this course. Okay, we dealt with the functions of the Board of Trade. It was very lightly supervisory, basically, as I told you in the last video. They nominated governors for royal colonies, plus they had final say on the laws passed by colonial assemblies. They would either allow them or disallow them, and they allowed, people, historians with no life and time on their hands have gone through their records, which still are on file after all these centuries, tell us that they allowed about 95% of the ones they reviewed. So basically, they're just passing them through, but you never knew what they're going to do because they, unlike almost any other part of the British or almost any other government, they never built up a body of precedent or letting past decisions guide current decisions. They just apparently didn't do that. So it was irritating because it took a long time to get a law put into effect, and you don't know for sure that it's going to happen. That's all of that, irksome as it was, did not add up to micromanagement. So, if colonists were grumbling about that, we grumble about government today, don't we? With probably greater cause. Okay, the next thing up in this tangled tale is a fortunately brief aberration from the British sort of non-policy of only trying to regulate economic activity and not anything else. It's something known as the Dominion of New England, and it only applied to a few colonies. In the last year of his reign, King Charles II, this is around 1684, 85, somewhere along there, he canceled the charters of all 4 New England colonies, as I understand it. That's going to be Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. New Hampshire only recently chartered, and lumped them all together into a single entity to be known as the Dominion of New England. Okay. Then he died. Charles II died in 1685, and although he had something like 15 illegitimate children, he had no legitimate ones. There's several members of the House of Lords today who trace their ancestry and their royal titles directly back to illegitimate sons of Charles II. That's beside the point. But his younger brother became James the Duke of York, after whom New York is named. He became King James II. And he lumped his own holdings, which became New York and New Jersey. They were called the Jerseys at the time because they were, for the time being, divided into East Jersey and West Jersey. They became part of the Dominion of New England as well. One of these men, I think it was probably James, but I'm not 100% sure, sent a governor over to run this. Their governor was a hard-bitten ex-army officer known as Sir Edmund Andrews. You see it on the screen there. I know it looks like Andros, but that's how they spelled Andrews in those days. And he was a top-down, no-nonsense kind of guy who went around and gathering. We'd go to the main towns, gather the main citizens, and inform them curtly, like he's talking to the drill sergeant talking to new recruits, is you have no more rights left to you than not to be hanged as criminals. Okay. Plus, even men like that took their religion seriously, and he was what they call a high church Anglican, and he dared to have an Anglican worship service in the Puritan city of Boston. Now, put that in context. That'd be like trying to organize the First Baptist Church of Baghdad. Got it? Or maybe Rome. So it's as if he's pulling all-nighters trying to find ways to upset people, stir up opposition. There would be no more assemblies. There would be no more of that kind of thing. It would all be just run by him. Not to say he wasn't a reasonably competent administrator aside from that, but this went on for about 3 years. Meanwhile, James II was doing pretty much the same thing over in England. Now, for context, the English monarch from Henry VIII on to the present day is the head of the Church of England. Okay? And it's a Protestant church. So it'd be awkward, to say the least, if the head of a Protestant church happened to be a Catholic and James II was known to be an out-of-the-closet Roman Catholic. What are we going to do? There's no procedure in place for this. Now, James apparently worked fairly hard trying to, ingratiate himself and all that. But he was planning, it is believed, to spring a trap and just boom, out of nowhere, all the rights of Protestants would be canceled. And England would be a Catholic country once again. So the ruling class of the country, already the landowners as a group, they figured, you know what, this dude is not a young man. He's not going to live forever. And he has 2 legitimate offspring to succeed him. They are both adult daughters, and they've both been raised as Protestants. So all we have to do is wait him out, and we'll be okay. But then in 1688, we're over in England now, 1688, James's wife 2.0 gave birth to a baby, a little boy. And in royal succession in those days, a male of any age precedes a female of any age. This little boy is not going to be raised as a Protestant. Okay? So that opened up the ghastly prospect of an unending dynasty of Catholic Stuarts. The family name was Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T. And in fact, his male line lasted until the year 1806. In the person of a man who became a cardinal in the Roman Catholic Church, and he's buried in Rome under a tomb, proclaiming the occupant of the tomb to be King Henry IX of England. Oh yeah, right. Okay, so something had to happen. At that point, James's daughter and son-in-law, his older daughter, and his son-in-law, who was one of the leaders of the Netherlands, a man known to us as William of Orange. William of Orange, it turns out, was, I believe, a grandson of King James I and was eligible to be a British monarch. He and his wife happened to be first cousins. Probably a good thing they didn't have any kids. Well, they landed on the southwest coast of England with a Dutch army, were greeted as liberators, partied their way in the direction of London. King James is getting nervouser and nervouser, thought, it's nice over in France this time of year, so he got on a boat and went over to France, leaving Parliament in session. Big mistake. Parliament, and they're making up a new rule to suit the situation, ruled that by leaving English soil with foreign troops there, he had abdicated his throne. So the Parliament declared the throne vacant. In other words, firing King James II from his job. Okay? And then subsequently turned around and awarded the throne to the daughter and son-in-law, who became King William III and Mary II, 2 numbered monarchs at the same time. That's the only time that ever happened. During their reign, a British ship captured a pirate ship with a bunch of treasure on it, and they used that to fund a college in Williamsburg, Virginia. And it is the second college in English America, the College of William and Mary, still there. So when news of that reached America, it was assumed that when James II went down, the Dominion of New England went down. That wasn't technically true, and at least one resistance leader jumped the gun and got in serious trouble for it. And it did take 3 years maybe to untangle everything and get it all back to normal, more or less normal, because William and Mary wanted to keep the Dominion of New England, but they basically, as a condition of their becoming the monarchs, they had to accept as a condition parliamentary supremacy. So from that day to this, the power of the English monarchy remains complete, unimpaired, and undiminished, but it is officially exercised in the name of the monarch by the House of Commons. And the royal couple had been put on an allowance, so their role would be ceremonial. So there wasn't anything they could do about it. So the Dominion of New England did go away, main difference being Massachusetts lost its original charter. And Lynn had been a charter colony electing their own governor. They became a royal colony at that point. So, fortunately, that did not take root. Okay, things settled down, and England itself, and we're about to call them Britain because in 1707 England and Scotland formally joined and have since then been known as the United Kingdom. Things settled down. And after a very, very turbulent 17th century, the 18th century would be very, very placid. Changes at the royal level. Queen Mary died of natural causes in the 1690s. In 1702, King William was riding his horse one day. The horse stepped in a gopher hole and threw him and broke his neck and killed him. Now, they had no children to succeed them, so the crown passed to Queen Mary's younger sister. This is James' daughter, Queen Anne. Anne was queen from 1702 to 1714, and although she was pregnant something like 12 times, give or take, at the time of her death, there was no one to succeed her. There's human tragedy in that, don't you think? The closest heir was this old woman over in Germany, Sophia the Electress of Hanover. She died before Anne did, so her son became King George I, introducing the Hanover line. And George I may not have spoken English. If he did, it was very rough version of it with a heavy German accent. But he liked being King of England. He took zero interest in the affairs of government. Let the English government run itself. That's when the office of Prime Minister began to evolve. The first Prime Minister was Sir Robert Walpole in the 1720s and 30s. Walpole, his policy with regard to the colonies came to be called salutary neglect. Salutary means healthful or beneficial. And Walpole concluded that it wasn't broke, and there's no point trying to fix it. Now, if you'd asked him, he would have said, well, yes, Parliament can micromanage the colonies if it chooses to. The power's there, but he just chose not to. Everything's working fine. The English are getting rich. The colonists are getting rich. The colonists are happy. The English are happy. It ain't broke. Why fix it? Salutary neglect was a policy of not having a policy. And the colonies prospered under that. Parliament did throw a few more odd offerings onto the Navigation Act's heap, but that's kind of where we were when we move into the 1750s and 60s, when things began to unravel in a hurry. The last thing, in the 1760s, the British government did create the office of Secretary of State for America. Secretary of State was an administrative position. They chose the wrong man for it. It didn't help matters, but it was way too little, way too late. So that concludes Imperial Administration. We're going to do a video here in a minute on colonial money systems. Stay tuned.